Greetings and hello, I'm Kaiser the 5th, coming to you today to talk about a subject that's on my mind, mainly tyranny and freedom. In the divisive and combative nature of American politics today, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that really, if you step across partisan lines, or at least hover above them, and look down at this, raging battlefield, you begin to realize that not only do the two parties live in almost complete opposite realities of one another, they are all for and opposed to the same two things. They all want freedom, and they all hate tyranny. Um, but and each side claims that their opponents will bring about tyranny and restrict freedom. And you hear, for example, you hear Democrats talk about reproductive rights, the right to choice, and you Republicans are bringing tyranny, to women's and are opposing women's rights, when they say they want to potentially outlaw abortion. And on the conservative side, Republicans, you see them talking about the right to life, and the rights of the unborn, and they accuse Democrats of subverting the rights of the unborn, subverting the right to life. If we lose the right to life, what do we have? And it's interesting to see if you look at it from an unbiased perspective. And you really start to realize how divided Americans are, not just intellectually, but spiritually and perceptionally. They live in totally different Americas. And it all centers around the one universal fear that all Americans have, the fear of tyranny, which imposes upon the thing they cherish most, freedom. And these are very, as you see, you watch how the different parties use them, these are very nebulous concepts. You begin to realize just how thin the line is, between these two parties' definitions of tyranny and freedom. And if you boil it all down to it, how the political parties view tyranny and freedom is anything that opposes something they want. Freedom is the ability to do what they want. And this is how the things are done in the world after the age of kings, I guess. This is how these subjects are dealt with. This is the lingo that we predominantly use now. And it's very disturbing because when you really sit down and think about it, if tyranny is only defined as opposition to something someone else wants, then it seems like anarchy is imminent, or the breakdown of faith in the political process is, it's doomed to happen. It will occur. It's a very scary thing to think about. Now, Americans have this funny idea that they are the guardians of freedom. They love freedom, land of the free, home of the brave. This kind of stuff. And while these magnanimous ideals are very noble, and while certainly America can have a distinction along with the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany of being a nation that is founded solely upon an ideal and not on geopolitical realities. And the reality is, actually, Americans are not unique in their love of freedom. As I've been preparing for a recent lecture I'm going to give at my college, potentially, cross your fingers, the Vendeans, the counter-revolutionaries that opposed the French Revolution and were loyal to the French monarchy, sung in their chant, they sung of freedom, from the godless, unpatriotic clique, as they called the Republicans, they sung of freedom. And to an American who has no historical context outside of his own world, what, the monarchists singing about freedom? What do they don't have freedom. But if we're just defining freedom as the ability to do whatever you want, it gets even weirder. Because if what French monarchists want is to live in a realm ruled by a legitimate monarch according to tradition and the principles of Catholicism and traditional France, and the rights and values that have made it successful, or rather made it successful in the past, then if they live under this system, they are truly free, at least by their own definition. Historically, freedom in terms of, proto-nationalism and other uh, situations in the past, freedom seems to be more complicated. Freedom seems to be, freedom from foreign influence, freedom from, and not necessarily foreign as in from another country or another part of the world, but foreign as in not adhering to, not cherishing your values, not respecting them, not upholding them, or outright banning them. So freedom, for, I imagine in the minds of the Taliban and in the minds of ISIS jihadists and the Mujahideen, they are fighting for freedom. They are fighting for the freedom of, they're fighting for the freedom of Islam and its ability to be practiced. And if you're going to use the new liberal definition of freedom, then you must recognize, or the American definition of freedom, you must recognize that ISIS, the Syrian rebels, and the Taliban are freedom fighters, right next to the Continental Army. So it becomes immediately clear that, now hang on a second, whoa, there's an obvious problem with our definition of things. There is a clear discrepancy, in our thought process here. Maybe we should consider going back to the drawing board. And you're damn right you need to. All Americans cherish freedom. Their problem is they don't know how to define freedom. We define freedom as just the ability to do what we want. And I was in a debate recently with some guys who were capitalists, really hardcore economic philosophers and economists and capitalists, who their only argument for capitalism was Walmart and Burger King. I can't make this up, okay? I couldn't make this up if I tried. I am, in the words of JonTron, I am sad that I lack the talent to make this up. I am also rather pleased with myself that I gave these guys more credit than that in my generosity, that they could come up with true substantial arguments for capitalism that basically didn't revolve around, well, at least it's not communism. That's, what? So in the face of the mounting abuses of capitalism and of American foreign policy and the uncalculated or calculated missteps that have been made over the last 60 to 50 years, your only response is Burger King and Walmart, big box stores. Do you do know how some of these items that end up in big box stores, right? You do know that for my right to own this, there are many Chinese Asian laborers who will not live past their 35th birthday because they're dying of cancer. I mean, this is, in the face of all that, these are not, this is capitalism. This is globalism at work. This is what happens when you have these guys who are pure social climbers and care about nothing but themselves, who are using capitalism and the uninhibited desire that Americans have for more and more and more and more, are going to these countries with no standards and exploiting their people. If you tried to do this in America, you would be hailed as a monster, but apparently because it's done out of our sight and all we have to do is reap the benefits, it's not that bad. How messed up is that? But getting off that subject, all Americans fear tyranny. All humans in the world fear tyranny. I promise you, I will stake a whole lot of my integrity on this. Even the most staunch totalitarians, the most vile reprobates, will not say that they want freedom eradicated, at least in the sense that they know freedom. Actual Nazis, real Nazis. I have had the unfortunate privilege of meeting real Nazis since I started getting more active in the political sphere. And they declare that they fight for the true freedom of humanity from the Jewish, British, capitalist, homosexual elite or some bullshit like that. They claim to be fighting for the benefit of the world. Communists need no introduction on that front. There is not a single, maybe in some isolated corner of the world there are some idiots who are literally fighting to throw the world into the dark ages. That's their stated mission goal. but I severely doubt that they're the majority, or that in the world at large, most people are fighting for good things. I imagine that right now, somewhere in the Middle East, there's an ISIS fighter sleeping somewhere in a hole in the ground, fighting against, the Kurds and the Syrians, and he's putting himself to sleep by saying, I'm doing what's best for my people. And I don't mean to sympathize with these people, because I don't support their goals, but I'm trying to show you how the left and right political dichotomy that has made everything in politics ideological and black and white on subjects from which there are a multitude of views, and none of them can necessarily be heralded as correct on some subjects like economy and just foreign policy decisions that are being made on the sole basis of ideologies rather than what's the best idea for the nation as a whole. I'm trying to show you how damaging this view is, American view on politics, which goes back to the French Revolution. It's really from the French, actually. It's from the French Revolution and, the National Assembly. I'm trying to show you how this system is damaging to your whole outlook on life. How you view people, how you come to understand things better. If you can just get yourself out of the left-right political dichotomy and start looking things objectively, I promise you, you're on your way to being a smarter person. Or at least feeling smarter. I feel pretty stupid some days, but I promise you, if you do that much, you're well on your way to feeling much better about yourself. You're on your way to looking at things from a more objective perspective. Now, with that in mind, again, all Americans view tyranny. They're afraid of being ruled by an iron fist and losing their rights, losing their privileges. This is what they're all afraid of. Deep down, just in spite of the fact that, even the Gestapo, as people have started calling it, doesn't want tyranny. Okay, they want freedom for themselves. Okay, even if their methods are questionable and their tactics, insidious, they are fighting for their freedom, or what they perceive to be their freedom. If you again strip the morals away, strip the technicalities away, look at it from how they see it, they're fighting for their freedom to do whatever the heck it is their end goal is. Because Americans now have defined freedom as just the ability to do what you want to do. And tyranny is defined as being stopped from doing that. By this logic, being told to put on your seatbelt, or not drink and drive is tyranny. By this logic, being told, let's say there, laws that are against clearly dangerous practices, like, shouting fire in a crowded theater, or, other similar acts. That's tyranny. That is an example of tyranny according to our new definition, and it's not hard to see how this is detrimental not just to common sense, but to a nation and its people and their overall intelligence and ability to make rational, reasonable decisions, and to support policies that will be good for their nation and will not be reckless towards their neighbors that are not threats to them. Or could be allies, or hell, if you want to look at it really cruel, buffer states, against possible threats from farther away. So this whole, what I'm trying to point out to you here is, America right now is, every American and every political party institution is fighting for the same thing, in one way or another. They're fighting for freedom. They are fighting for the right. They're fighting for rights, for privileges, for freedoms. But what is freedom? Freedom, really in a proper defined context, should be the ability to do good. That's what historically freedom has been. Freedom is the ability to do good. Freedom is your capability to make the right choices. Freedom is the ability to, follow your conscience. Freedom is not reckless, rugged individualism that sacrifices the community and nation on an altar. The freedom of a nation was once defined as its ability to defend itself and not be forced into, a union, or forced into a empire that would not respect their cultural heritage or their religious heritage, one that would force them to give up their rights and their laws. This is why the Carolingian Empire was never seen as a tyranny, because Charlemagne respected the laws and the customs of the regions he absorbed into the Carolingian Empire. This is why the Scots viewed, the English attempts to unify Scotland pre the Act of Union as tyranny, because they saw, the English were trying to assert a feudal right they didn't have. And the English were trying to support that right by force of arms. And freedom for the Scots was, honestly, if you look at it from a purely, odds are Scotland would have not changed much under English rule. I mean, there would have been some minor changes, but honestly, not much would have probably been affected or changed. Not just because the English weren't willing to do it, because they lacked the infrastructure or the monolithic state to do some of the things we now associate with invasion and assimilation. They just would have lacked the funding. They would have lacked the ability, lacked the very concept of, doing something like what you probably imagine, the English invading Scotland to be, replacing haggis and a stiff drink with tea and crumpets. It's that kind of system wasn't even a possibility back then. But still, the Scots declared they were fighting for their freedom to have a lawful king on the throne, their freedom to be independent and self-determining. That's what freedom used to be defined as. In the grand political scheme of things, not reckless abandon to do whatever the heck you liked. And tyranny was not simply the obstruction of tyranny was not simply the obstruction of being able to choose to do whatever you wanted. This is why the Russian Empire was historically viewed as tyrannical, because everywhere they went, they engaged in a policy of Russification, which is making areas they conquer more Russian. That's why the Russian Empire was viewed as so tyrannical and so authoritarian, because they had that policy, and because of how pervasive it was. And you can, if using these examples I've given you, you can very easily apply certain compare and contrasts to various nations throughout history, and you can see, where tyranny and freedom, interact differently, and how their different meanings make a little more sense than what we have now. Because there's no way in hell our ancestors built, what they built, with these nebulous, ridiculous, self-centered philosophies that, as their end result the destruction of any civilization of any sort at all, and a return to barbarism. That is, it's clear to see when you start looking at it this way. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I see right now, and I'm wearing lapel pins with, the coat of arms of the House of Windsor. I pray for their conversion, and I also have here, one of my grandfather's lapel pins, which is which is the heraldry for the coat of arms for the U.S. Air Force. And I kind of have these both. I usually wear them in pairs because I feel like it represents, to me at least, my dual heritage, the fact that really in my thoughts and in my mannerisms and I am old European. I am old guard. That's just how I feel about things. But I am also an American. That's where God put me. That's where I have been put down, and clearly this is what I have to work with, and this is where I am told I must live my life. And for me, doing so with America, I see an America that's weak because it is divided, and it's in danger because of that. We're divided along these fault lines where when Republicans and Democrats argue with each other, if you watch hard line, just regular guys, if you watch them debate, they'll counter something with something related to the subject but different. They'll bring up, when someone brings up, and sometimes they don't even know what the other person's talking about. So they take that the other person's confusion as their victory. And so both people walk away defeated and victorious. I'll give you an example. Somebody who's pro-life will talk about, the various abuses that go on in abortion clinics, money laundering, subversive manipulation of women into thinking abortion is their only option for their children, and a Democrat will bring up how pro-life legislators have done things like, charge women with homicide for having miscarriages, or how in their health and reproductive services bill, where or one of the bills, they're talking about making birth control affordable. How staunch and questioned it and unquestionable it is, and yet, you know, the bill apparently in one state or in some part of the world in the United States or part of the United States, you can get Viagra and other male enhancement products using your health insurance, using Medicaid, but you can't get birth control pills. And people are stunned by that. And the Democrat takes this as victory. When the Republican brings up some Democrat policy that is just insane, the Democrat is like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. You're lying. And it's just, they both walk away thinking they're victorious, and they both walk away thinking they're defeated. They don't stop to discuss, and realize they're both being played. They're manipulated and lied to and given a false representation of America. They don't even know what the real issues are. They don't even know foreign policy. They don't know economic policy. They don't know anything. They don't understand how things are working now and how they're creating the problems we have. They don't understand, especially don't understand that the same special interest groups and lobbyists pay for both sides, and they talk to both sides. They don't care who wins. Sometimes they choose who wins out of the two. It's like a invisible, arbitrary decision. That's, if you're going by freedom as the ability to validly elect, a representative government, you don't have that in a nation like this. You don't. You do not. Because if a government traditionally for a nation is, the sovereignty is invested in the people, they choose the leader. Well, that's how they do things. I don't think it's the best system, but that's how they do things. If monarchists, tyranny is deposing a monarch and putting something else in its place that's not legitimate. I imagine then for Republicans and Democrats, tyranny must be the subversion of their political process, and you've been living with the subversion of the political process for around the last 50 years, I dare say even farther back than that, you've been living with the subversion of your political process. I don't remember who said it, but somebody asked, some important businessman, was it Bill Gates? I think it was Bill Gates. It was somebody asked, why should Hillary Clinton be president? The answer was, she paid her dues. Now, coming from one of the most powerful, software moguls in the world, that's pretty telling. I mean, I'm just saying, and the fact that they would say something that, even if that's not what he meant, if he would say something that could be construed that way, and yet no one reacts, that tells you how untouchable these people are. That tells you how above the political system they are. They control everything in terms of business and money, the things that are the lifeblood of this nation, ultimately. They control all this. And yet, they're not responsible to you. They don't care about you. The only reason they're in charge and someone else isn't is because, they cut a little deeper. They drew a little more blood from their opponents. Is that scary? Is this scaring you yet? Are you slightly uncomfortable? Because you should be. You really, really should be, digesting all this information. And I tell you this to make Americans hopefully understand and realize the two-party system must be destroyed. They must be ripped up, root and stem. The people who are just been drug along for the ride need to be reached. They need to be cured of their mental diseases and afflictions and corruptions. They need to be shown how things really are, and the people who willingly perpetrate these lies must be punished to the utmost extent so that justice will be satisfied. Because these are the people who will be the authors of American destruction, of the destruction of any republic, of any democratic system. They will be the people who will be said of in history books that they did it. We now blame the destruction of monarchies and nations on certain politicians and bad cabinet members. Our equivalents will be the people who will be said of in other countries, they brought about the downfall of America, either through the ineptitude or through willful, sabotage. That's something to think about. That's something to consider heavily. Okay? Now, in closing, I just hope I hope I'm making my point. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here, because this is very important. You know, I'm a monarchist. I think the best thing for America is a monarchy, because clearly our democratic and republican system has failed to preserve the rights we cherish, to preserve freedom. You know, it's failed to do that. It's failed to be impartial. It's failed to be unbiased. It's failed in every conceivable aspect now to maintain the souls it finds itself lording over. It's failed utterly. And we need a change. But we're not going to have that change if we're still arguing over the color of the fire in a burning house. We're not going to. What matters is the house is burning, you need to put out the fire, and they need to find the motherfucker who set it on fire and set him on fire. And everything he loves on fire. And maybe kick his dog. I don't know. You know, something fitting. Because this is a big deal. People's lives are being ruined by this system. You know, people's families are being torn apart by these artificial political divides. You know, churches are in turmoil. The Catholic Church is in turmoil. The Conciliar Church, I mean, as much as I dislike it, you know, it is the nearest clear present offspring of the Catholic Church, and there is still hope, I think, for a turnaround. There's still hope, I think, for conversion. You know, the right people doing the right things and saying the right things, a few good holy saints, you know, we can fix it. We can turn it around. And a big part of why the Catholic Church is in the turmoil it is today is because it's subject to these political systems. It's caught up in them. It's allowed itself to get trapped up in them. And it's forgotten that it is its own ideas, it's own culture, it's its own heritage, it's its own history. You know, it's forgotten that. And this system is inimical to that, because these political discussions have been thrust to the forefront of everything. In the media, in, you know, pop culture, in everything. It's become pervasive and all-encompassing in a way no totalitarian state or idea could ever be. And it needs to be fixed. Because how can you possibly have freedom in a nation that can't even define it properly? How can you be immune to tyranny when, according to your nation, tyranny is around every corner? You know, there is no, it's just an amorphous being, or it's conveniently applied to the enemy of the day. It's not a clear, present thing. These are the questions you need to ask yourselves. These are the things you need to think about. I'm going to leave this video here. I made some other videos that I did not share to my other pages, like I'm going to do this one. So just check out my whole Facebook page, check out the stuff I've posted, and give it a read through, give it a watch through. You know, it's just my face. Unless you really like looking at my face for some reason, just, you know, pop it on, do your work around your house, you know, do what you got to do, you know, and just hear me out, okay? And if you like what you hear, you know, whatever you think, I don't care what you think, okay? I don't care if it's underwater basket weaving is difficult. If that's the one phrase that comes to your mind when you're watching this, I want it in the comments. I want to know what you think. I want to know your opinions and your thoughts. You know, I want to know how you feel watching this. You know, even if it's why is your jacket collar popped? It looks stupid. Well, I would like to know, because it happened when I was putting on my jacket. I kind of think it looks nice. I kind of like it. Just with the double collar down, it just looks kind of stupid to me. But it is like this. I like it. I like it. I like it. Okay. So, without further ado, God bless you.